Our next guest is Verginia Kruta, and we're going to talk to her about her article that she wrote for the Daily Caller. Let me just give her bio right quick. Verginia Kruta is an associate editor at the Daily Caller. She's a third-generation Army veteran. Kruta's article about her attendance at progressive candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rally went viral, and we're talking with her today. How are you, Verginia?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for having me in.
Great, great. And I also want to say a disclaimer that Verginia brought in donuts and treats from her family's bakery, and I did not bribe her to bring those in or anything, so we appreciate that. Give the name of the bakery.
It's Kruta's Bakery over in Collinsville, Illinois.
Excellent. Address?
Let's
go. Let's get it all
300
out
St.
there.
Louis Road.
Excellent. Phone number?
What is this, some kind of...
I don't know it offhand.
All right.
No, but it's at Kruta Bakery on Twitter.
And I got to tell you, the bakery goods are excellent. It's homemade. It's old school.
Gosh.
It's
so
yeah,
good.
yeah.
It's so much.
Tony and I are just hoping we don't fall asleep here eating all of these sweets.
And you're hoping I don't bounce off walls.
Exactly. Now, usually, you know, when there's an article written, there's always a money quote that's in the article. And I'm going to read your money quote in this article, and then we're gonna talk about it.
Good, because I don't know what it is yet.
This is the money quote. And this is from Virginia's article. By signing a letter that tied the credibility of the accuser to feelings of solidarity and the possibility of a shared experience, these women pushed a dangerous narrative that the standard for credibility is no longer rooted in trustworthiness or a reputation for telling the truth, but in whether or not one can empathize with the story being told. That's the money quote.
All right. Okay, so the way this came about, I was reading all of the news that was coming out after Christine Blasey Ford first came out. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things that happened was 65 women who knew Brett Kavanaugh came out with a letter supporting him, saying, hey, this is not the guy we know.
Right.
This doesn't fit his personality. It doesn't fit his character. He's a good man. He wouldn't have done this. And so you take that for what it's worth. They knew him. Mm-hmm. Some of them dated him. And so, you know, that speaks, it's a good character witness, right? So the next day, a letter comes out from alumni of Holton Arms, Holton Arms School, which is where Ford went. And they said 299 women had signed this letter. And then it jumped to 599. Then it was over 600. And then it was 1,000. And one of them was... what's her name from Seinfeld?
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
And she had signed it. And if you read the letter, it doesn't say we knew him. It does, or we knew her. It doesn't say, you know, she has a reputation for being a trustworthy person. It says we went to this school, and the type of party she describes sounds like things that our friends or even ourselves went through. And so there was this kind of solidarity vibe, and you know, women have a common experience. And I'm not discounting the value of common experience. That's it. It brings people together all the time. But to say that this is a measure of credibility does a disservice to my children, to any woman who comes forward with a story, because I mean, if you're going to be believed because you're a woman, as opposed to because you have something truthful to say, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to the discourse, and it's not helpful to society as a whole. And this is especially relevant today because I noticed just before I came in here, Vox has an article up. There are some 600 women from Yale University who have now signed a similar letter supporting the latest accusation against Kavanaugh, that you know, women have experienced this for decades, and you know, obviously she's telling the truth because we've all been there.
Becky, do you have a question? Oh, I thought you were about to say something. So how much of this do you think is because there are no corroborating witnesses in this case when she was at this party in high school? How much do you think a part of this is, well, if we get a letter from 200, 300 women, even if they weren't there and don't know this person, but saying that we believe her, that gives credibility to there not being any actual witnesses that have come forth?
I think the point of the letter was, I don't know if it was intentional to balance out the lack of witnesses. It was, I think the intention was to show solidarity, to say, hey, we believe you because we've been there. And I understand that point, but I don't think it helps us. I don't think that it's valuable. And I made this point on my Facebook page, and I was immediately called out and said, how can you betray women like that? Like,
yeah,
it's not a betrayal of women to demand that they meet the same standard of truth that anybody else does. I mean, if you're going to speak the truth, and eventually it will come out that you are correct. But to say that, there's some other measure that makes your truth more true, it's ridiculous.
When I said earlier, when I put your article up, there was a friend of mine that was from St. Louis, she lives in D.C. now, said, thank you. This is what I have been, the same feelings I've been wanting to express. Have you been hearing from other people? And this is Verginia Kruta. She wrote an article in the Daily Caller. Have you been getting stuff from other women? Encouragement?
I have had a few. Most of them are people that I know and who happen to be conservative anyway.
Right.
And so I'm not really expecting a lot of backlash from that. But but a lot of the comments have been, this is why people don't report. Well, no, this is why Duke lacrosse players can't show their faces in public anymore.
Right.
There's a very real difference, and these are real people that you're affecting. I mean, they want to talk about how, one woman asked me, what would you do if your 15-year-old daughter was assaulted like this? And I said, look, I'd encourage her to report. I would and if she wouldn't report, I would get her the help that she needed. And if she did report, I would push for prosecution. But if I found out she was lying, she would be grounded for her natural life. But the question no one is asking is, what about my 16-year-old son?
Right.
I had to talk to him last night and tell him, any woman could ruin your life with an accusation. It won't matter if it's true. It'll just matter if people believe her over you. And guess what? She has the advantage because they will.
Bernita, you mentioned how you got backlash about turning your back on women, and I see it with Chris on the Weekend Report all the time. When do we reach a level? How far away are we? Are we even close to, the Democrats, the liberals are the party of women, except for conservative women, because you guys are traitors. It's the party of minorities, except for people like Chris Arps, black conservatives, because he's a traitor to the cause.
I think it's Uncle Tom.
How long until the numbers? How long until the millions of conservative minorities and women and everything else just don't let that message continue to be spread by the Democrats?
That's an interesting question, because it really isn't dependent on the conservative minorities. It's more dependent on who controls the media. Because it's not who's speaking, it's who's amplified. Because you have a lot of conservative women and conservative minorities who are speaking loudly, but they're being trampled by larger media outlets that won't talk to. I mean, it's like after the Parkland shooting, who did the main networks talk to? They talked to the ones pushing gun control, and the two guys who were not pushing gun control, nobody would talk to them.
Yep. Exactly right.
It's the exact same thing.
And it's the year of the woman until the women speak out. And how many times have you, Virginia, been attacked? I'm not physically, but I mean just through the various media outlets. How many horrible things have been said about your family?
Well, let's see.
Because you spoke out.
I have a 5 quick things profile on Heavy. None of it flattering, except for the chainmail hobby. They did address that fairly honestly, so that's kind of funny. But no, I got ripped into by Media Matters and by Think Progress. That was kind of fun. Of course, they clipped part of the relevant part of the interview I did on Fox and Friends in order to make me look like what they wanted to. I had to turn off Twitter notifications. Luckily, I had a planned vacation anyway, so I went to Florida and kind of forgot about it for 2 days.
To your point about who's amplified, I went on a bit of a rant on the Weekend Report on Saturday about Karen Monahan, who was the ex-girlfriend of Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison, who happens to also be the co-chair of the DNC, number 2 in the Democratic Party. Here's a woman that came forward a month ago with allegations that weren't 35 years old, that were recent.
She has ER reports, too.
That has way more evidence than anything that we've seen against Judge Brett Kavanaugh. And not only has she been silenced, but she's been smeared and she's been completely disregarded. So, but the party of women, all women need to be believed. All women need to be listened to. All accusations need to be investigated, except for the one against Keith Ellison. Because
Juanita Broderick could not be reached for comment.
Yeah, great point.
Virginia, give everyone where they can reach you on the Daily Caller, your Twitter, all that good stuff.
Okay, I am writing almost daily at the Daily Caller, and you can find me on Twitter at VA Kruta. That's pretty much it. I'm there all the time.
Thanks for coming in, and thank you for the treats.
Absolutely.
And you'll come back?
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you. That's Verginia Kruta. We'll be back next